The Heat were down by as many as 19 in San Antonio, but an incredible comeback fueled largely by a 17-0 run helped turn this into a competitive back and forth game. But Duncan Robinson, the leading scorer from both teams, had 26 points in one of his best games ever to lead the charge. And Miami shuts down Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs to win their fifth straight game. An amazing performance. And we break it all down, including Miami's key rotation change, and answer your questions on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg. Joining me as always is David Ramil. However you're tuning in, YouTube, Odyssey, your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. A big win for the Heat. Kyle Lowry and Tyler Hero both out for this one. A second night of a back-to-back. The Heat trailed by as much as 19 points. They trailed by 11 in the fourth quarter, and they still managed to get a win on the road. The Heat beat the Spurs 118-113. David, what was your takeaway from the game?
It was just seeing everybody step up. They struggled so badly in the first quarter. They looked like they were hungover after the game in Atlanta on Saturday night. And then they really struggled, missed all 8 of their 3-point attempts in the first quarter. And then slowly but surely kind of found a way to chip in, and whether it was Bam Adebayo hitting really tough contested mid-range jumpers, Duncan Robinson finding his groove, getting even to the line at times, Jaime Jaquez stepping up, and then in the third quarter, Kevin Love with all of his points in a big moment there, just really, really impressive showing after kind of being out of the rotation and then coming back as a backup big. Just a really big game. Jimmy playing key minutes, Josh Richardson against his former team, the Spurs, down the stretch. Just really a really well-rounded game for Miami.
Josh Richardson with a big three-pointer with just under 2 minutes left in the game. Comes back, hits a pull-up mid-range jumper with 1:20 to go. That put the Heat up by 4 and basically clinched the game for them. Just a great moment for Josh Richardson. It's been a really rough start to the season for him. And it was rough for most of this game, too. This was not a great Josh Richardson game at all. It was a great Josh Richardson 60 seconds, basically, from the 2-minute mark to the 1-minute mark left in the game. 5 straight points for Miami to put the game away. And to your point, that's sort of that collective effort that you're talking about, isn't it, David? Where it's, look, no Tyler Hero, no Kyle Lowry. This is kind of on everybody. And that's not to take anything away from Bam Adebayo, who was incredible again tonight. I mean, we've talked so much about Bam in every game that he plays. I'm just like, yeah, this dude's taking a leap. And it's just so obvious. 24 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 steals for him. Going right at Victor Wembanyama. We've talked a lot about how he's taking these matchups against big men on the other side personally and embracing it. And he's not shying away from it. And he's basically saying, you know what? Yeah, I am taking this stuff personally. And I do want to put on a show. And I do want to make a statement. And I love that. I love when players play that way. I feel like we shy away from that stuff so much. And especially in the Heat, the whole Heat culture is like, it's never me. It's always the team first. No, sometimes I want you to just put you first and make a point. And Bam did that tonight. It was you get him, and then the trickle down effect from there. Everybody else stepping up. I don't love the next man up kind of mantra. I think it's a little silly at times, but tonight it really did feel that way.
I think you had to kind of find a way to make this a much more egalitarian offense, especially because of the loss of Tyler Hero. We talked about it after his injury. Like, he is such a huge component of what Miami had been able to do up to that point. And he was really key for whatever success they had managed earlier in the season. But without him, somebody's got to take the variety of shots that Tyler is capable of doing. There isn't any one player who can reproduce what Tyler does, and so it falls at everybody else. Whether it was Kyle Lowry coming up big over the last couple of games.
Don't tell that to Duncan Robinson.
That's right. That's right. Duncan's as pretty close as it can get, and I don't think. Are you finally starting to see my perspective on this, and that versatility has really paid dividends for him? It's not like the 3-point shot was.
No, he is a better player now. You and I always agreed on that. He is a better player now. My point is, when Tyler Hero was on the team, I just needed more people to take 3-pointers, and he was kind of veering away from the 3-point shooting a little bit too much for my taste. But with Tyler out, that's why all this stuff starts to pay dividends. I'm not anti-development. I'm not anti-be a better player. I just like, hey, do all that stuff. We know you can do it. That's all fun. Please take more 3-pointers because they're worth more than the 2-pointers. But with Tyler out, you need it. And like I said, like I'm only half joking when I say don't tell Duncan Robinson that no one player can replace Tyler Hero. But 26 points on 8 of 16 shooting, 4 of 7 from 3-point range, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists in this game is basically what Tyler Hero has been averaging this season.
Sure.
And Duncan Robinson went out and did it tonight. Again, the Spurs are not a great team. They're actually, in fact, a very bad team. But I don't say that to take anything away from Duncan. I don't also expect him to do that every single night. But tonight he did it.
Yeah, 6 free throw attempts for him too. Looked like he was taking it a little personally at times, trying to attack. Was it McDermott out there? Whoever was on him, he just had a.
He shook Wembanyama.
Yes, the spin on the baseline there. Yeah, it was fantastic. Pulled it back out, faked him out completely, and then drove right past him for a reverse layup. Just a really good game from him. His touch around the basket has been so sensational. And he usually gets like pretty wide open looks when he's finally at the rim, just because. To your point, like he shook everybody. Like you're not expecting him to make that big cut or to get past that initial line of defense.
What was your reaction what was your honest in the moment reaction when he pump faked Wembanyama and sent him flying and shook him and got to the basket?
I couldn't yell because my son was falling asleep, but I did a little quiet fist pump because I felt a little validation about being so high on that kind of diverse game that Duncan's been showing off here and there over the last couple of years. We saw it early on last season, then it kind of picked up at times throughout the regular season, certainly in the postseason, and now it's just a completely different level. He's like a much better, more well-rounded player.
I yelped, I think is the correct. It's like the most accurate phrasing for it. It was a yelp.
That's a high pitch, yeah.
It was a high pitched, yeah. I definitely hit the higher register of my voice. I yelped. I was so surprised. I never thought I would see that. I love the game from him, and I love the game from everybody. And filling again that void that Tyler Hero, he's averaging 21 to 22 shots per game in the season. You saw Duncan Robinson basically averaging 8.5 shots, 9.5 shots, I think, per game before tonight, or before Tyler Hero's injury, I should say. 16 shots for Duncan Robinson tonight, which is where you and I thought he should probably somewhere between like 14, 16. It's kind of the ballpark, and that's what he hit. 20 shots from Bam, which is about right where he's been. 14 from Jimmy Butler, which is about where he's been. But you get 10 from Jaime Jaquez. You get 7 shot attempts from Josh Richardson. You get 8 shot attempts from Kevin Love. 9 from Drew Smith. And Drew Smith actually had a pretty nice game. A very much best game of the season, actually. Yeah. So it's not going to be one person, even as good as Duncan Robinson was. It's going to be going forward for these next couple of weeks. Like, all right, these guys in the starting lineup, but really even off the bench in that second unit that was so Tyler Hero-centric, who steps up in those units? And I think it was Drew Smith and it was Kevin Love and it was Jaime Jaquez in that second unit. And then in the starting unit, it was very much Duncan.
Jaquez continues to impress. He's just such a spark plug because I think to your point, since not one player can do what Hero does, you kind of just need, and without Kyle today, who's been really good at setting things up and being, the point guard, with Jaime doing what he does, it's more about quickening the pace, transition baskets, always keeping the ball moving. It was just like an instant jump start when he was in the game because that anemic offense in the first quarter was all too familiar for Miami Heat fans. Then Jaquez comes in and all of a sudden he's forcing a turnover. He's getting to the rim. He's drawing a foul call, making things happen. Like that's been the mantra for him since he's kind of showed up this season. Like he's been really, really good and just kind of forcing things to go Miami's way. He puts pressure on that San Antonio defense, and then all of a sudden the spacing gets better. Guys are taking more 3-point shots. They're hitting those 3-point shots, and it just opens.
What's my favorite phrase? What's my favorite phrase? You know this.
Which one? You have a lot of favorite phrases.
It started making it happen. He does stuff. Doing stuff. He does stuff. Jaime is a guy that does stuff. My favorite stat, I think, from this game was Bam having 6 assists, which was a team high. And that is, I love when the offense flows through Bam Adebayo. It just it works so much better. He had a couple of really important kickouts in this game, the open 3-pointers. And I thought that was huge too when you're talking about the loss of Tyler Hero and the loss of Kyle Lowry as a table setter. But we get to our credit cookies next. We have questions about Miami's rotation later on in the show. All of that is coming up here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode of Locked On Heat is brought to you by Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Do you want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill or comedian Andrew Schultz? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entire entries, stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football, basketball games, if you have a player who exits a game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What do you think of like Bam's statistics and rebound? His rebound numbers have been so great lately. Would you take the over on those when it comes to Prize Picks entries?
Lately, I would. I mean, he had 11 rebounds tonight, and I think he's pretty consistently over on all those.
Yeah, good point. I think he's just been a lock for that. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA, and you get a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. We're going to get to some questions about the Heat's rotation when they're healthy later on in the show. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, your favorite podcast app. Well, David, it is time for the tastiest segment in Locked On Heat. It is time to hand out some credit cookies. As always, we have 10 credit cookies to hand out in any amounts to any Heat player. Who do you want to start with?
You know, I kind of want to get into Kevin Love a little bit and his improved role, his dramatically changed role. I know it's kind of a twist here, but I think we've talked about Bam, we've talked about Duncan. Duncan's phenomenal game stands out over everybody. He's going to get his share of cookies. But when it comes to Kevin Love, a guy who was out of the rotation and then played all of a sudden after 3 games, DNP CD, he plays against the Atlanta Hawks. Huge boost as a second string center. You and I talked about that as a potential role for him, and it's worked out really well. Those minutes kind of fluctuated today because Thomas Bryant got his opportunities too until Love found a way to bounce back. But his 12 points in the third quarter were phenomenal. They were so huge, and he played really big. Like, I think he was just a game changer in that Zach Collins, a favorite of yours, I know, he really turned things around in the third quarter for San Antonio. And then Love gets into the game, completely changes the tempo, attacks Collins, gets him into foul trouble, forces him out of the game, and then from that point, Love went on to have a really big impact. I really loved how he changed things back in Miami's favor. Miami had already cut the lead at halftime to 3, but with Love in there, he was able to kind of mitigate one of all of a sudden San Antonio's better strengths than Collins because he was really forcing his way on a smaller Haywood Highsmith. Then you bring Love in there, all of a sudden he can't attack him in a low post as easily just because of his size. He got a couple key rebounds, initiated a fast break or two. Just really good game from Kevin.
I love that Eric decided to go back to him as the backup center in that Hawks game and then continued with that, but then also gave Thomas Bryant a few minutes. And I like Thomas Bryant a lot. I think Thomas Bryant's biggest concern, the issue with Thomas Bryant's game is the longer he plays, the more he gets exposed. And if you can sort of limit his minutes, he didn't play any in Atlanta. He played 5 minutes tonight in San Antonio. I think that's fine. I thought he was a +9 in 5 minutes. Like when you kind of make it easier for him and you say, hey, here's 5 minutes. Do it all that you got to do here in 5 minutes. Go all out in 5 minutes. I think he has an easier time with that. And if it'll be interesting to see what Spo's approach is with the backup center minutes going forward behind Bam. Like, is it going to just be Kevin Love? Is it going to just be Thomas Bryant? Or is it going to be something like tonight where it's mostly Kevin Love and it's a little bit of Thomas Bryant in the second half? And I think that might be a good balance. I don't think that that's a playoff strategy, but in the regular season, that's definitely feasible. As sort of like a half guy in the rotation and Thomas Bryant's concerned. But I love look what Kevin Love brings to the table in terms of rebounding, physicality, being able to space the floor, and all of these things, the outlet passes, obviously, this basketball IQ. Like those are just things that Thomas Bryant isn't bringing to the table. Thomas Bryant brings like a physicality and a rebounding thing that Kevin Love at this stage in his career doesn't bring. But that stuff is like, okay, lightning in a bottle for like 5 minutes, go. And then, but for most, like Kevin Love, had 14 minutes tonight? That seems about right to me. If you're not going to play Bam for 20 minutes, that's a good kind of disbursement of those minutes.
And look, you have to realize it's going to work against San Antonio. They're basically starting two centers in Wembanyama and Collins, and they bring in Charles Bassey off the bench, who had a nice spark himself,
I like
using
him too.
a little of that physicality. But Miami countered that and said, you know what, we've got a guy who can stretch the floor, make plays happen. You have the option of bringing the physicality of Brian off the bench too. So it's a really good change of different players. You've got three centers who can really do things in different ways for Miami.
So we've got cookies for Duncan, for Bam, and for Kevin Love. How many cookies are we giving out to those three guys?
I've got 3 for Duncan, 2 for Bam, and 2 for Kevin Love. So that's a total of 7 so far.
I feel like it needs to be 3 for Bam, but I know we have more cookies that we need to give out.
That's the thing. I've got one apiece to Haywood Highsmith, Drew Smith, and Jimmy Butler. And Jimmy had a decent game. He shot poorly, but as you and I were talking before the game, like he just made his impact, passing the ball, really forcing turnovers, just being the incredible defender. At one point in time when the lead was kind of slipping away for San Antonio, they were kind of building on that. Jimmy just aggressively drove to the rim, drew a foul, big shot. I mean, just the fact that he can still control things. I think we're going to see this more throughout the regular season too. Like we talked about the slow start, maybe due to the fact that he didn't play at all during the preseason, but now he has to pick and choose these spots when he's aggressive. And that kind of follows a pattern that he's shown over the last couple of seasons because we know what he does in the postseason. You got to save yourself. Injuries are always going to be a part of who Jimmy is, but you want to be able to prolong this as much as possible. They didn't play against Atlanta on Saturday, play tonight, coming back. So I think it was a nice showing overall from him.
I think it was a good Jimmy game. I don't think Haywood needs a cookie. He didn't score. I thought his defense was fine, but it wasn't anything like – it wasn't special because of the bar that Haywood Highsmith has set. I didn't think it was like a cookie worthy game, even if we want to give him a shout out for his defense overall. And I think Jaime Jaquez Jr. has earned a cookie. 11 points on 10 shots off the bench, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, and 4 steals.
You're right. I had him on my list, and I did, but I don't know why I didn't ascribe a cookie to him. Yeah, Haywood gets Haywood gets the shout out. Jaime gets the cookie.
Yeah, that's just breaks of the game. I actually, and we talked about this last week, David, positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
And using cookies as a tool of positive reinforcement. I would love to give Josh one cookie. Even if we have to take one away from Duncan or somebody like that. I think we just need to give him a cookie. I think Duncan would be okay with it, yes. Josh Richardson, 4 of 7 tonight for 12 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, and a steal. I thought he was very positive in his 26 minutes. And like I said, he made maybe the 2 biggest shots of the game in those final 2 minutes. That's cookie worthy.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Interesting wrinkle in the rotation. I don't know if it was said at any point during the broadcast, but he did not start the third quarter, and Spo kind of brought him off the bench in that quarter, and he wound up stabilizing the second unit and then wound up being a closer for the Heat and a big-time closer and such. You know, he wound up hitting big shots down the stretch, as you said. But 4 of 7 from the floor in his 20-something minutes. It was a really good, solid overall game from him and a nice bounce back. I think this is the sweet spot for Josh. We don't know what's the future holds for him when Caleb Martin returns to the rotation, if Josh gets any kind of playing time at all. But for now, if he's going to be able to make an impact, especially in these minutes overall, I think he's still a quality player. It's certainly an improvement over where he was, a week or 2 ago.
A shooting slump to start the season is never easy for any player to deal with. He was not as bad as he was. He is not as bad of a player as he was in these first 2 weeks. This is a little bit more in line of the kind of quality player that he is, which is why Miami was so excited to get him back at the minimum in the first place. So, all right, you mentioned the rotation concern. We have a question about that next when we get to our listener questions. Plus, what has Nikola Jovic done to be out of this rotation altogether? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. We spend a lot of time talking together, you and I. We get fired up on wins like tonight and losses. Who starts and who sits? I'm thankful for the connection we have. And today, I want our chat to be a little bit more personal. I just learned that you can get a 1-year supply of ED medications. You realize what that means? Bring on an extended travel. Bring on the next natural disaster, whatever supply chain issue might manifest. You are covered, my friend. You don't have to worry about whether or not you can refill your generics for Cialis, Viagra, or Revatio, And this is possible because of our friends at Jase Medical. Go online right now to Jase Medical. That's JASE medical.com and you get your 12-month supply of your daily medications, whatever they might be. Remember to use the promo code Locked On at checkout, and you get a discount as well. A verified customer had this to say about Jace. Quote, I'm so thankful for this service. Supply chain issues caused me to cut pills in half to get them. I ordered most of my daily meds with a year's supply, and I also ordered an antibiotic kit. I feel secure now. Prices are lower than your local pharmacy, and I highly recommend this for everyone. If you or someone you love would get some peace of mind by having a year's supply of any daily medication, go to Jase Medical, that's JASE medical.com, and see if it's offered to you. And remember to use the promo code Locked On for $20 off your purchase of Jase Medical.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. We'll get to our listener questions now. Thanks to everybody who sent in questions on Twitter using that hashtag AskLOHeat. You can also send in questions via email, lockedonheat@gmail.com. And on Instagram, you could find us, Locked On Heat on Instagram. You could send in any questions that you may have via DM. This question comes from Sean, who writes in, is it true that Duncan Robinson is dating Taylor Swift? David, he's playing like a star right now. I'm all for it. Unfortunately, no. Taylor Swift actually made it official at a concert in Buenos Aires over the weekend, changing the lyrics to Karma to say that the player from the Chiefs is coming home to me. So pretty much confirming the Travis Kelce stuff. Not that it needed confirmation.
Wow.
But it's the real deal now. It's a big deal.
I will harken back to our media day interview. I will harken back to our media day interview when you spoke about your travel to go see Taylor, and Duncan responding very favorably. So he's quite a Swiftie himself, I'm sure, or at least an appreciator of our music. Excuse me. So yes. No, not dating, but certainly a fan.
Maybe you can get a phone call. I don't know. Can Taylor Swift leave him a voicemail? Can she just write one song about him? I think that's not too much to ask.
Whoa, right. No, you got to break up with her first to get a song, don't you? Is that the knock on her?
I guess so.
I can't wait for the double album once Travis Kelce breaks up. Sorry, never mind. I don't want to put that out there, right? All right,
no, we don't want that. We're all fans. They're a lovely couple. Nate writes in, who do you think will not make the Heat rotation when Tyler Hero comes back? So before I throw this to you, David, just quickly, the players in Miami's rotation tonight, obviously the starting five: Jimmy Butler, Haywood Highsmith, Bam Adebayo, Duncan Robinson, and then Josh Richardson for the first half, and then he was in the rotation for the second half. Jaime Jaquez Jr., 32 minutes off the bench. We talked about Kevin Love and Thomas Bryant giving minutes, and obviously Drew Smith as the backup point guard. No Kyle Lowry tonight, which is a big reason why Drew Smith got those minutes. But assuming everybody's healthy, we're going to throw Kyle Lowry into the mix here as well. Obviously, he was out tonight just because of the second night of a back-to-back. Who do you think is out of the rotation?
The most likely choice is probably Drew Smith. I think he's the low man there. As much I think as Spo has faith in what Smith does, especially on the defensive end, I just don't know how you can kind of shoehorn him in when you already have enough ball handlers and guys that can create shots and things of that sort. You really don't need him to settle. I mean, it could be either Drew Smith or Josh Richardson, one of the two.
Well, we're talking about two guys that need to be back in the rotation, right? And so Spo went with like a strong 8 and like a quiet 9 when you consider the 5 Thomas Bryant minutes. Yeah. He could still go 9 deep if he wanted to, but I'm going to go ahead and say, obviously, with back, Drew Smith just doesn't get the minutes. And then when Tyler Hero comes back, and then Caleb Martin has to get minutes too.
Yep.
So we could be talking about no Josh Richardson, no Drew Smith, and maybe no Thomas Bryant. If Spo just commits to the one backup center, maybe it's no Kevin Love. I guess it's whatever backup center of the month we're on.
Yep.
So yep. I think that we could see Josh and Drew Smith both out of this rotation, and then maybe him just going with the one backup center, and getting Caleb, Kyle, and Tyler back into the rotation, because we know those three are going to be in the rotation. There's no doubt about that.
Do you cut Jaime's minutes? Like at this point, he's playing significant minutes there. I don't know if there's a drop there.
32 minutes. He probably doesn't play 32 minutes, but I don't know how many fewer, right? I think you want to play him. I think he's earned 18 to 20 minutes easy, like minimum almost at this point.
I mean, it just goes to show you, like we have said this pretty consistently about Miami's depth being one of their strongest, if not their complete total strongest asset. You've got Caleb Martin, who was the best player through a lot of the playoffs last year for Miami, and he winds up, I don't even know where he misses every game of the season, and he hasn't been completely missed either. And I think you get a big production from Jaime, and now we're talking about how indispensable Haywood Highsmith has been. Like, Caleb Martin's role has been greatly diminished, and so now you're going to have to figure out how to play him 15 to 20 minutes a game. Probably, I don't know. That's kind of
if you give him Josh's minutes tonight.
Sure.
He played 26 minutes. That's an easy way to just give Caleb Martin those minutes. I think that's probably where we'll end up. And then with Spoelstra going with a 9-man rotation. And I think it'll be Lowry, Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Haywood Highsmith, and Bam Adebayo as your starting 5. And then you're going to have Caleb Martin, Jaime, and then whatever, if it's Kevin Love or Thomas Bryant, coming off the bench with Duncan Robinson also coming off the bench at that point with Tyler healthy. So that's a 9-person rotation, but that does not include Nikola Jovic, who Brian asks, how far out of the rotation must Jovic be to not get in the games this weekend, considering Jimmy Butler didn't play in Atlanta on Saturday, no Kyle Lowry tonight, David, obviously no Tyler Hero, no Kyle Martin the entire time. How far out of the rotation must Jovic be? It's an interesting question.
I mean, I think he's completely out, and I don't know that he has an opportunity. It's going to have to be an injury to Bam, I think, for him to kind of get any kind of significant playing time. Like, you could probably get away with starting Kevin as a center, or you might go Thomas Bryant and then have to add somebody to the front court when, Kevin Love can't play extended minutes off the bench, or, however it might work out. But, you could go really small too and just choose not to play Jovic at all. And I think he struggled, and there was a nice interview by Anthony Chang talking about that today. Jovic's lack of minutes and knowing that he accepts Spo's decision, and he's trying to work his way in trying to improve in every aspect so he can earn that playing time. He just can't seem to crack the rotation. So I'd say he's pretty fairly out, and then we'll see the occasional minutes just because Miami's always going to deal with some injury issue or another. He'll get some playing time, but he will not be a regular part of the rotation moving forward, barring some kind of miraculous transformation.
He's the 14th guy on the roster, isn't he? At this point, I mean, Orlando Robinson is probably closer to getting minutes than Nikola Jovic at this point, and so it's one of those two. I mean, we're talking about those are the bottom two, Orlando Robinson and Jovic. These are the guys who haven't really gotten into games all yet this year. No, even we saw Orlando Robinson play against Milwaukee. So I think Jovic is sort of the 14th guy right now, and I'm glad you mentioned the interview with the Miami Herald. I don't know that it's necessarily. I don't want to go so far as to say that it's anything negative against Jovic. I just think that there's not really a spot for him in this rotation, especially with Jaquez being able to play the 4 spot and the 3 spot. There's not a need for him, and this team is deep at center, right? I mean, deeper than we even thought. If Kevin Love is also a center now, with Haywood Highsmith being the starting 4, like they've got 4 guys at center that they feel pretty comfortable with, and Jovic is not even a center. So when you think about what the options are at power forward, you also have Haywood Highsmith. You still have Kevin Love as an option if you need. You have Caleb Martin eventually coming back, who played power forward for most of last regular season. I don't know that there's really, and then obviously Jaquez. So I think it's really Jaquez being more ready than Jovic that has pushed him out of the rotation, because I don't know how many more spaces there are for him. You're not going to give him Tyler Hero's minutes because they don't play the same position. I don't really like if you're unhappy with Josh Richardson or Drew Smith. Jovic can't take those minutes. He doesn't play those positions. He can't take Kyle Lowry's minutes. He doesn't play that position. So it's just a tough I think it's less of a commentary on him as it is more having to do with the depth at the position that he plays and the fact that he's not trusted at this point. He's still he had great flashes in the preseason, no doubt about it. There's also moments where he kind of looked jumbled and a little confused and lost out there. And Spo's just not going to put up with that. It's defensively and even offensively. Sometimes he just runs into other guys. It's just
that's fair. I mean, he'll have his flashes offensively, but again, for what we talked about with Jaime, he's the guy who mixes it up. He goes against the bigs, who can force a turnover to rip the ball from them. He just dives to the floor. He's kind of forcing.
You can run plays for Jaime. You can literally run offense through Jaime in the mid post. You've seen it. You're not doing that with Jovic, and Jovic isn't really that kind of player anyway. But still, again, this is not an anti. I don't think him being out of the rotation means that there's a lack of a belief in Nikola Jovic's abilities. I just think it's the position he plays, and the fact there are just players that are more ready to win now than he is. And the fact that Miami came out of the gates and we're down 3 games under 500 doesn't really help things, right? Like these games, they're not must-win games because it's only November, but there's also not a whole lot of time to mess around right now. You got to get back up to, and now obviously they've won 4 straight games, 5 straight games, whatever it is. But yeah, so obviously that's helpful. But yeah, I think there's still an internal belief in Jovic, but what's the phrase go that coaches always say, like development's not linear, right?
Yeah.
I think that he's developing behind the scenes, he's putting the work in. He'll get on the court, like you already said, at
He's
some
healthy,
point this year, but
yeah.
he's not in the night-to-night rotation. And yeah, he's also missed a week because of an illness. Like that, we should mention that.
Right.
We're only we're barely 3 weeks into the season here, so that's important too.
Can we just shout out the team's draft gurus, because Jaime Jaquez has just been such a nice find. And I know that there are questions, but he dropped all the way to Miami at 19th, and he's just been such a productive guy at a team that's won 5 straight games. Like that counts for something. That really is pretty impressive. Yes.
Great pick. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on your favorite podcast app.